just talk a little bit about how you feel with what's happening in Minneapolis, with what's happening with the protests. How are these protests different from things we've seen in the past? You know, because back when Michael Brown was shot and there was the protest in Ferguson, you know, what's the difference between what happened then and what's happening now?
So I'm 100% with you. Like when George Floyd was killed, it was kind of like, okay, here we go, another day. Like, you know, this weekend, I kind of went through another whirlwind because we had an incident this weekend in Atlanta. And, you know, growing up in Atlanta, you kind of build yourself in a safe place. Like you're like, as long as I'm inside the city limits of Atlanta, I'm fairly safe. Once you get outside the city limits, you're on your own. And so Atlanta just kind of, it shook a lot of us in Atlanta for that to happen here. But you're right. So the protests this time are different from the perspective that there is more diverse inclusion actually in the movement. Traditionally, it's just been Black and brown people, you know, in the movement. And this time, just to see the diversity of folks protesting has been amazing. I think a lot of that goes to a couple of things. You know, we don't have the distractions that we've had in you know, in prior incidents, right? You know, there are no new movies to go see and talk about. You know, we watch every single possible series and there's no sporting events. So there's nothing else to talk about, right? So this, you have to pay attention. And so I think what's different about right now is everybody was blindsided to something that's really just been boiling for really centuries. Unfortunately, what's still very similar, you know, the protesters are still being met with a strong force of either police or military presence. And instead of dogs and water hoses being used, it's tear gas and bullets, or, you know, rubber bullets. So we're moving forward, but then there are days it's like, it's still all the same. And so I hate to say it, there are days I just hold my breath and pray that change will come. And then there are days sometimes you just got to sit in the corner and just say, hopefully it's not my husband or my father.
Right. Janine, same question for you. How do you feel about what's happening and how maybe it's different than what's happened in the past with the protests and everything?
I definitely think social media is the difference. You know, everyone has a camera in their hand, and then everyone can kind of give their opinion and put it on Facebook and Instagram and all of that. When George Floyd, when the incident with George Floyd happened, you know, like Natalie, I see it on my timeline all the time. I mean, I look on my Facebook and there's another video. So we had just gotten over Ahmaud Arbery, and I mean, that struck me just really hard. And then it was George Floyd. So I actually didn't watch the video at first, earlier in the day, but then everyone was sharing it. So then I watched it and I cried because I watched a man die on a video. And then I was so upset. I guess I became so upset after that because people said, but he was a thief, but he was a criminal. He's been to jail 8 or 9 times. And all I could say is, but he didn't deserve to die in the street.
Right.
He did not deserve to die in the street. You know, the same with Ahmaud Arbery. We have a process in this country that we hope works. And you are to be arrested and put in jail and then have your time in court. But you're not to be shot in the street like an animal or just killed in the street. So it grieved me. I was exhausted after that weekend. And another thing that was exhausting is that my brother is a SWAT officer for ATL, for the Atlanta PD. And so his wife is also a cop. She's Caucasian. He is not. And it's difficult. When that video happened, and I know the world was watching Atlanta the first night of the riots, and they overtook the CNN building, my brother was right there. And I actually got overwhelmed with emotion and started crying then too, because I thought I saw him. And, you know, there was a lot going on that wasn't being talked about on the news. And so it was very violent. The cops were in peril and my brother could have been killed that night. And it was very scary. to watch. And so my mother was a sheriff's officer. I had a brother that was a cop. I have one that is a SWAT officer right now. He's in that tank. When they talk about the militarization of the police department, he's in that tank and he's in the green. And I want him to be safe. I want the protesters to be safe. I want everyone to be safe. So it's a lot of emotions. That Monday I was happy for shelter in place because I probably wouldn't have the energy to go into the office. I wasn't okay.
Yeah.
Initially. And it has been tiring over the past 2 weeks. This thing that happened in Atlanta this weekend. I'm not okay. I don't think that man should have died.
Yeah.
And so I'm not okay. And it's a lot.
Yeah.
My 28-year-old son, my husband, my father, it's not okay. And it is very upsetting.